He was never meant to make waves. Just another black man with a boarding pass and a quiet sense of purpose, expected to nod politely, absorb the sneers, and accept whatever seat they decided he deserved. The staff didn't bother to lower their voices when they joked about putting him in his place. They didn't imagine that the man they were ridiculing was holding the fate of their biggest deal in his hands. One smirk too many, one threat too far, and the ground shifted under them in ways they couldn't control. This is the story of how a simple act of disrespect turned into an earthquake for an entire company. A lesson in what it costs to underestimate someone you think can't fight back. If you want more stories that peel back the mask of everyday cruelty and show what happens when people refuse to stay silent, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. Let's get into it. Michael Harris walked briskly into Atlanta International Airport, rolling his black carry-on behind him with steady, purposeful steps. The terminal was humming with announcements, the murmur of conversations, and the scuff of hurried feet on polished tile. He checked his watch, plenty of time before boarding, which suited him fine. He preferred to handle travel details early, leaving nothing to chance. He was dressed in a tailored navy suit with a subtle pinstripe, his white shirt crisp, dark blue tie knotted neatly. He exuded calm professionalism, the kind of man used to conference calls and contract negotiations. As he scanned the signage overhead, he turned toward the airline counter to check on the first-class upgrade he'd paid for last week, still marked pending in his app. Behind the counter was Jason Parker, early 30s, with lank brown hair combed sloppily to the side. His navy vest was wrinkled at the shoulders, name badge slightly crooked, but the smirk on his face seemed perfectly in place as he joked with a coworker on the next terminal. As Michael approached, Jason didn't even acknowledge him at first. He kept talking, something about a dumb video he'd seen online. Michael cleared his throat politely. "Excuse me, sir. I need some assistance with my reservation." Jason finally turned, glancing at Michael like he was seeing a stray dog wander into a restaurant. He raised an eyebrow slowly, leaning back, voice loud enough for people in line to hear. "Yeah? What's the problem? Lost your ticket?" Michael's jaw tightened, but his voice remained even. "I paid for a first-class upgrade last week. It's still marked pending in the app. I'd like to verify it's confirmed before boarding." Jason snorted, one side of his mouth curling in an ugly grin. "First class, huh? That's ambitious." He drew out the word ambitious, his tone dripping with sarcasm. A woman behind Michael stopped scrolling her phone and looked up. Her kids whispered to each other, watching. Michael didn't rise to the bait. He simply handed over his phone and ID. "Reservation number is on the screen." Jason took it between two fingers, as if it were sticky, and turned lazily to his computer. He typed in exaggerated slow motion, sighing theatrically. Pending, huh? That means it didn't go through. Sorry, man. Not my fault if your credit card doesn't clear." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter came from Jason's coworker at the next terminal, who was half listening in. Michael exhaled slowly. "My card is fine. I got a charge confirmation. Please check again or call your supervisor." Jason raised both eyebrows and turned to the line theatrically. "He wants the supervisor." "Oh." A few people behind Michael glanced at each other. Some smirked, some looked away awkwardly. Michael remained composed, though his pulse was thudding in his ears. Jason pretended to look very busy for a moment, tapping at keys with two fingers, before finally grabbing the intercom mic. "Carla? Got a customer at terminal for who needs a supervisor because he thinks he's too good for economy." He clicked the mic hard enough to make crackle. He set it down with a flourish and gave Michael a smug look. Michael leaned in slightly. "There's no need for this attitude. Just process the request or escalate." Jason tilted his head, mock listening. "Attitude? Oh no, man, you're the one with attitude. Coming in here like you're some big shot. Maybe you should have flown Greyhound." Michael's face remained expressionless, but his fists clenched at his sides. Jason leaned forward, voice lower but still carrying. "Look, I get it. You want to dress up in a nice suit and pretend you're some VIP. But the system says no. Take it up with them." Michael didn't move, just held Jason's gaze. Finally, Carla Dean arrived. She was in her 40s, with hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked tired of life. She wore a blazer with the airline's logo and Supervisor Guest Experience on her badge. She sized up the scene quickly. "What's the problem here?" she asked in a clipped voice. Jason jumped in immediately. "Guy's demanding first class. Says his app is broken." Getting a little heated, Carla's eyes flicked to Michael, neutral but skeptical. Michael spoke evenly. "I paid for the upgrade. It says pending. I'm asking for verification or a manual override." Carla didn't even look at his phone. She just said, "Pending means unconfirmed. There's nothing we can do. Take your assigned seat." Michael's voice stayed calm, but colder. "Is there a manual override?" "No," Carla snapped. "You can wait until boarding. Maybe they'll clear you if there's room. Otherwise, you're in 23C. "Well, look who's still here," Jason said loudly enough for nearby passengers to turn. Michael raised his eyes slowly, voice calm but frosty. "I'm documenting what happened. I'm filing an official complaint." Jason gave an exaggerated sigh and shook his head. "Man, you just don't give up, do you? Look, I already told you. You didn't get the upgrade. Not my problem. Now you're just loitering." Michael's fingers tightened on the phone. "Loitering? I have a ticket. I'm waiting for boarding like everyone else." Jason barked a laugh. "Yeah, sure. You're harassing staff, hanging around like you're going to do something." Michael's nostrils flared. He forced his voice low, deliberate. "I'm waiting for my flight. That's not harassment. I want your supervisor now. And I'm not talking about you. I want your manager." Jason rolled his eyes dramatically, turned, and sauntered back to the counter. He hit the intercom again with an audible smack. "Hey Carla, guess who's crying for you again?" His voice echoed across the terminal. A mother shushed her child, glancing over uneasily. An older businessman lowered his newspaper to watch. Carla appeared within minutes, her steps precise, expression pinched with annoyance. She approached Michael without greeting him, her arms crossed. "Sir, what seems to be the problem now?" Michael stood slowly, meeting her eye level. "I'm filing a complaint about your employee. He has been mocking me, insulting me in front of passengers. I'm asking you to do your job and record the complaint." Carla sniffed once, her gaze flicking dismissively over his suit, his bag, then settling on his face with a faint sneer of professional detachment. "Sir," she began, voice falsely polite, "I've heard from Jason that you've been aggressive, that you've been raising your voice and insulting him. That is unacceptable." Michael's jaw dropped slightly. "Aggressive? I haven't even raised my voice. He's been insulting me the entire time. You saw it before." Carla's lips twitched into a faint, brittle smile. "Sir, we're not going to argue semantics. You're disturbing the operation here. If you can't calm down and stop causing a scene, I'll have to ask you to leave." Michael's eyes widened. "Causing a scene? I'm asking you to do your job. This is about accountability, not aggression." Carla gave an exaggerated sigh. "Sir, we have a lot of other passengers to help. We can't devote all our time to you. You're being disruptive. If you can't respect the process, I'll be forced to take further steps." Michael felt his pulse hammer in his ears. His breath came slow and tight, every instinct in him screaming to lay into her with words that would tear her smug authority apart. But he had seen this play before. This was the trap, the slightest escalation, and they'd claim he was violent. He closed his eyes for half a second, forcing his voice calm. "You're siding with your employee who publicly humiliated me, who insulted me repeatedly, who refused to help. That's your standard of customer service." Carla's expression flattened to a cold mask. "Sir, please calm down. I'm going to give you one last warning." Michael opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand. "Security, please." She didn't even look over her shoulder. The word alone summoned them, as if she had pressed a hidden button. Two uniformed airport security officers approached quickly from the side. Their faces were neutral, professional, but the authority in their walk was unmistakable. They stopped on either side of Michael, flanking him like prison guards. The taller one, Officer Kelly, spoke first, voice clipped. "Sir, is there a problem here?" Carla didn't miss a beat. Yes, this gentleman has been harassing my staff, refusing to follow instructions, and is disrupting operations. Michael's head snapped toward her, eyes flashing. That's a lie. Carla sniffed, deliberately looking away. The second officer, a stocky woman named Officer Daniels, shifted her weight slightly. Sir, we need you to lower your voice. Michael fought the urge to scream. He let out a shaky exhale. I am lowering my voice. I've done nothing wrong. I was insulted, mocked, and I asked to file a complaint. That's all. Jason's voice rang out from behind the counter with theatrical innocence. Man, you were yelling at me, telling me you'd ruin me. I felt threatened. Michael's head whipped toward him. You liar. The officers closed in slightly. Officer Kelly's tone was suddenly less friendly. Sir, you need to calm down now. Inside the terminal, Carla returned to the counter as if nothing had happened. She smoothed her blazer, exhaled deeply, and glanced over at Jason, who was checking in the next family in line. As soon as they walked away, Jason leaned back against the counter, exhaled a noisy sigh of mock exhaustion, and said loud enough for the other employees to hear, Man, some people just don't know their place. Carla didn't even look at him. She just said, enough, but there was no real force behind it. Another employee, Matt, a stocky man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, raised an eyebrow and cracked a smile. What did he think this was? A free ride to the country club. Jason snickered, more like the plantations gone woke. They both laughed, the sound low, but not so quiet that it didn't carry to the other side of the counter. Standing at the far end of the line was Danielle Grant, a black woman in her late 30s dressed in a charcoal gray business suit, holding her boarding pass and watching the exchange with a hard, furious gaze. She'd been there for Michael's entire ordeal, had seen how they smirked at his questions, watched them call security like he was a threat. She swallowed hard, feeling anger coil hot in her chest. She shifted her briefcase against her hip, took one step forward, and cleared her throat. Excuse me. Her voice was low, deliberate, measured. Jason looked over at her with bored disdain. Yeah. Danielle held up her boarding pass. I just wanted to make sure before I check in. Are you going to treat me the same way you treated that gentleman? Or should I call security on myself in advance? The words landed like a slap. The line behind her fell silent. Even Carla blinked, her mouth tightening. Jason's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before returning, sharper now. Ma'am, he said, voice dripping with faux patience. We don't want any trouble. Don't start something that isn't there. Danielle didn't blink. I watched you humiliate him for asking a question. I watched you lie about him being aggressive. So which one of you will do it to me? Carla's voice snapped out, hard and brittle. Ma'am, we're asking you to lower your voice. Danielle's lips parted in disbelieving laughter. Oh, I see. That's the script, right? Accuse the black customer of being loud so you can have security remove them. Carla's face flushed a dull, angry red. She leaned forward, voice lowering to a poisonous whisper. If you don't lower your voice, I will have to ask you to leave the line. We will not tolerate disruptions. Danielle's eyes flashed. I'm asking about your policy. Carla raised a hand, cutting her off. I don't need to explain anything to you. You can either check in quietly or you can leave. Danielle's jaw tensed. She scanned the line, passengers shifting uneasily, some avoiding her gaze, others clearly uncomfortable with the scene. A middle-aged man in a windbreaker looked like he wanted to say something but swallowed it back down. A young mother pulled her toddler closer and whispered, "Shh, don't stare." Danielle felt her heartbeat in her throat. She took one last slow breath and stepped back from the counter, hands raised slightly. "I see how it is," she said in a voice that shook with controlled fury. She turned and walked away, joining the cluster of people watching from the side. Jason watched her go, shaking his head with mock pity. "Touchy, huh?" he muttered to Matt. Matt shrugged. "Entitled. Thinks she's special." Jason snickered. "Special delivery to Coach." They both laughed. Carla pressed her lips together but said nothing, shuffling some paperwork to appear busy. Across the terminal, leaning against the wall, was Stephen Alvarez, an off-duty journalist waiting for his own flight. He'd watched the entire scene unfold, his phone held casually at his side, screen dark, but camera still rolling. His jaw was tight. He'd started recording when Michael had first approached the counter, capturing Jason's mocking tone, Carla's dismissal, the smirking insults about knowing your place, the laugh about the plantation. Stephen wasn't black, but he knew a story when he saw one. He knew a scandal when it unfolded in real time. He also knew that the corporate PR department for the airline wouldn't have a pre-written apology ready for this kind of footage. He checked the battery on his phone, adjusted his grip, and kept filming as Danielle walked away, her back stiff with fury. At the counter, Jason leaned in closer to Matt, lowering his voice just enough that he thought it was private. "Dude, she acted like we were gonna whip her or something." Matt chuckled. "Should have told her to take the Underground Railroad to the back of the plane." They both laughed, shoulders shaking. Carla pretended not to hear, but the tips of her ears were bright red. He wasn't about to explain the whole ordeal to some rep in a call center reading from a script. He needed to handle this here, now, at the counter where it had happened. He waited until the worst of the boarding rush died down before returning to the terminal entrance, adjusting his tie, squaring his shoulders, and telling security he wanted to speak to management. The security guard at the door, a tall, no-nonsense woman with a shaved head and piercing eyes, regarded him carefully. He kept his voice calm, low, professional, explaining that he wasn't trying to cause a scene. He simply needed to make sure the people responsible for humiliating him were accountable. She listened, arms crossed, gaze steady, and finally relented, calling her supervisor on the radio. Minutes later, Michael found himself seated on an uncomfortable plastic chair near the security checkpoint, waiting for the station manager. He rehearsed what he'd say over and over in his head, controlling his breathing, refusing to let anger crack his calm. When the station manager arrived, Michael recognized immediately the corporate uniform. Navy blue with gold stripes on the sleeves, a polished name badge reading Thomas Kerrigan. The man was older, gray-haired, a practiced smile that looked like it had been ironed into place over decades of customer complaints. He extended a hand, which Michael shook stiffly. "Mr. Harris, I understand you had an incident at our counter today." Michael held back a laugh at the word incident. He forced himself to speak carefully, enunciating each word like he was reading a deposition. "Your staff member Jason Parker repeatedly mocked me, gave me false information about my ticket, insulted me in front of other passengers. And when I asked for help, your supervisor Carla Dean accused me of being aggressive and called security to remove me. I want this documented formally. I want to file an official complaint." Thomas nodded slowly, jotting something in a small black notebook, eyes occasionally flicking up to Michael's face. "Yes, I see. Well, I've reviewed the preliminary report filed by the counter staff." Michael's eyebrows rose. "You mean Jason's report?" Thomas didn't miss a beat. "The team's report. They indicate that you became verbally aggressive, used threatening language, and created an unsafe environment for both staff and other passengers." Michael blinked, fury surging through him like a spike of electricity. He drew in a slow breath. "That is a lie." Thomas's expression didn't change. "Sir, this is the statement they gave. They allege you threatened to have them fired and to ruin their lives. That's very serious." Michael exhaled sharply through his nose. He couldn't help the bite in his voice. "You mean I told them I'd report them? That's not a threat. It's a promise of accountability." Thomas's pen paused for the first time, but he didn't correct the record. He just continued writing. Michael's voice rose, unsteady with incredulity. "Are you seriously going to pretend you don't see the difference? I asked to file a complaint. They called security to drag me out. I was humiliated in front of dozens of passengers. That is unacceptable." Thomas's mouth twitched at the corners, the forced calm of a man who had long since stopped actually caring about the truth. "Sir, please calm down. I understand you're upset, but the behavior described in the report is grounds for removal from the terminal." Michael forced himself to stand, needing to move, to burn off the shaking anger in his limbs. He paced a slow circle in front of Thomas. "You weren't there. You didn't hear the jokes. You didn't hear Jason say, "I didn't know my place." You didn't hear him laugh about sending me back to Greyhound. Your supervisor did nothing, and you're telling me you're just going to take his word over mine. Thomas looked up at him coolly. "Sir, the written statements are consistent. That's what we go by." Michael stopped pacing, chest heaving. "You mean they backed each other up?" "Of course they did." Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "Mr. Harris, I'm trying to help you. But if you continue raising your voice and refusing to cooperate, I will have to ask you to leave." Michael clenched his fists so hard his nails dug crescents into his palms. He forced himself to swallow. "Fine," he spat. "What happens to my ticket? I paid for first class." Thomas flipped a page in his notebook. "Given the incident, the staff have decided it would be best to rebook you on the next available flight this afternoon." Michael waited, watching him. Thomas didn't meet his eye. Finally, Michael ground out, "First class?" Thomas didn't look up. "No, economy." Michael closed his eyes. "I paid for first class." Thomas shrugged, a bureaucratic flick of the shoulders. "Your fare has been converted to a basic economy seat in light of the disruption. It's the only way we can accommodate you today." Michael felt his heart hammering against his ribs, the rage so bright and hot it nearly blinded him. He opened his eyes, glaring. "Let me get this straight. I paid for first class. Your employee humiliated me. Your supervisor called security to remove me. And your punishment is to put me in economy. No apology, no refund." Thomas finally met his gaze, face like stone. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mr. Harris. It's our policy." Michael let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a snarl. "Where in your policy does it say you can steal someone's money because they had the audacity to ask for decent service?" Thomas didn't answer. He just closed the notebook and stood. But Michael felt as if he were outside it all, observing through a thick pane of glass. He ran through the conversation with Thomas Kerrigan over and over, hearing again the station manager's polished, bureaucratic voice explaining how Michael's behavior had necessitated a downgrade. He remembered the phrase exactly. "Your fare has been converted to a basic economy seat in light of the disruption." He'd wanted to scream that it was their disruption, their lie, their trap. But he hadn't. He'd kept it together. Barely. Now he sat and waited, fingers drumming against the armrest in an uneven, angry rhythm. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him, the screen lighting up with an email notification. He snatched it up instantly, eyes narrowing. The subject line made his stomach twist. "Notice of passenger conduct and travel restrictions." He tapped it open, reading each line with growing disbelief and fury. "Dear Mr. Harris, following today's incident at our Atlanta terminal, this email serves as formal notice that further escalation or harassment of our staff will result in an immediate ban from Airline Co. services. We take staff safety and customer conduct seriously. Any attempts to file malicious complaints or threaten employees will not be tolerated. Sincerely, Carla Dean, Supervisor, Guest Experience." Michael let out a short, incredulous laugh that drew a wary glance from the family seated 2 chairs over. He pressed a hand over his mouth for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. Malicious complaints? They'd humiliated him, called security, lied in their reports, downgraded his ticket. And now they had the gall to threaten him in writing if he dared complain about it. His fingers itched to hit reply and unload every furious word he'd been choking back for hours. But he forced himself to close the email instead. He needed to think. He needed to plan. He couldn't afford to be impulsive. He looked up just in time to see Jason Parker wander through the terminal walkway toward a side door that led behind the counter area. Jason's head bobbed as he talked, his voice rising in its familiar nasal whine, oblivious to how far it carried in the cavernous space. Michael couldn't catch every word, but he heard enough to make his vision blur red. "I swear, man," Jason was saying to another staffer, voice cracking with laughter. "They just don't get it. Dude shows up in his fancy suit thinking he owns the place. Had to remind him where Coach is." The other staffer, a younger guy with sandy hair and a pimply jawline, snorted. "Zerigo Osli, man." He was about to cry. Jason made a dramatic boo-hoo face and wiped imaginary tears from his eyes. "Oh, please, help me. I'm too important to sit with the peasants." The sandy-haired guy giggled, eyes darting nervously around the terminal. "Dude, keep it down." Jason waved him off, louder now. "Nah, what are they gonna do? I was doing my job, remember? Supervisor's on my side. That's the best part. She sent him that email already. Told him if he complains again, he's done." The other guy laughed harder at that. "Seriously?" Jason nodded vigorously, smirking. "Yup, banned. That's what happens when people don't know their place." Michael's fingers dug so hard into the seat's armrest that he felt the cheap plastic flex. He forced himself to stay put, to breathe, to watch. His heart felt like a bass drum in his ears. The two employees wandered out of sight behind the counter doors, their laughter fading but not disappearing. He watched as Carla herself reappeared at the podium a moment later, fussing with the computer and checking boarding lists. She didn't even glance in his direction, as if he were beneath notice, as if he were just another piece of luggage left by the wrong gate. He felt the phone vibrate again. Another message popped up on the screen. This time it was a push notification from Airlinico's app. Check-in confirmation for flight 3342/C37E/ATLLEX. He snorted, as if he needed the reminder. He switched to his notes app instead and began typing furiously, making sure he captured every detail of what he just overheard, every word Jason had spit out so carelessly. He included the email verbatim. He noted the time, the location, even the appearance of the staff laughing about it. He wanted every fact preserved, recorded before rage could muddy the details. All around him, boarding began. Groups were called. Families collected their bags. Overhead, the voice crackled cheerfully about special assistance boarding, priority groups, then main cabin. He waited until they reached his group, the final one, the leftovers, the unwanted. He stood stiffly, rolling his suitcase behind him, feeling every eye on his back as he walked past. Some people smiled politely. Others avoided looking at him at all, like he carried something contagious. He paused at the gate entrance, holding up his phone for scanning. Carla didn't even greet him. She just took the barcode and waved him on without making eye contact. He swallowed hard and stepped onto the jet bridge, the industrial carpet muffling the uneven drag of his bag. The smell of jet fuel and stale air rushed around him, cool and metallic. When he entered the plane, the flight attendant near the door put on a bright, forced smile. "Welcome aboard, sir." Michael nodded stiffly. "Where's 37E?" The attendant's smile faltered slightly, pity creeping in. "All the way to the back on the left, by the lavatories." He nodded once more, jaw set. Figures. He walked past rows of plush first-class seats, watching other passengers sip drinks and recline comfortably. Past premium economy, with its wide seats and extra legroom. Into the crowded rows of coach, the smell of reheated food already hanging heavy in the air. He kept walking until he found 37E, a cramped aisle seat with the back wall of the plane looming inches behind it, the lavatory door directly across from his knees. He stowed his carry-on with stiff, precise movements, lowered himself into the seat with barely controlled rage, and exhaled so hard it fogged the scratched plastic window next to him. But Michael couldn't shake the image of Jason's face, twisted in open glee as he mocked him. Couldn't forget Carla's cool threat in that email, promising to ban him if he complained. And worst of all, the laughter. That ugly, knowing laughter, the other staff chiming in. He could still hear it like a needle skipping on vinyl. The flight crew closed the door and gave the safety demonstration, and Michael felt a claustrophobic weight on his chest. When the plane pushed back from the gate, he finally made up his mind. He couldn't let this go. He unbuckled, ignoring the flight attendant's warning to stay seated. He stood carefully in the aisle, head low to avoid the overhead bins. "Sir, please sit down," the attendant said sharply. "We're taxiing." Michael raised a hand calmly. "I'm not making a scene. I just need to speak to someone before we take off." She hesitated, clearly trained for unruly passengers, but reading his calm demeanor. She stepped closer. "What is it?" Michael spoke clearly. keeping his voice measured but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I was removed from first class for no reason, called security on, and downgraded to this seat. I have the receipts to prove I paid for the upgrade. I want a supervisor. I want my refund. Or I want to file a formal complaint before we take off." The surrounding passengers fell quiet, watching. Some blinked in surprise. Others leaned back, subtly listening. A teenage boy 3 rows up turned in his seat, phone in hand, recording automatically. The attendant's face went red. "Sir, you need to sit down right now, or we'll return to the gate and you'll be removed." Michael didn't budge. "That's fine. Return to the gate. Remove me. But document why. I'm asking for accountability, for my refund, for a formal complaint. You're denying me my rights as a paying passenger." People began murmuring. A man in a business suit frowned. "Just let the guy make the complaint." An older woman whispered, "That's disgraceful." But someone else further back muttered, "Oh, here we go." The attendant's earpiece crackled. She turned slightly, listening, nodding, and then straightened with forced calm. "Sir, please wait here." Michael nodded once, standing steady despite the roll of the taxiing plane. He clutched his phone in one hand, the crumpled boarding pass in the other. He opened his camera, started recording. "Documenting this for my own protection," he said into it quietly. A moment later, the plane shuddered to a stop on the tarmac. The captain's voice came over the speaker, careful and cool. "We're experiencing a brief delay. Please remain seated." The flight attendant returned with 2 burly ground staff in neon vests waiting at the door. She gestured. "Sir, they're asking you to deplane." Michael raised an eyebrow. "Because I asked for my refund. Because you're refusing to comply with crew instructions." Michael exhaled slowly. "Fine. I'll leave. But I want it on record. I'm leaving because you refuse to process my complaint or refund. Say it." She stared at him, mouth tight. "Please exit the aircraft." Michael turned to the other passengers. "You're all witnesses. I asked politely for my refund and my complaint to be heard. This is what happens." Phones lifted. He saw them. People recording him. He felt the heat on his cheeks, but refused to look away. He gathered his bag from the overhead, shouldering it stiffly. He turned in the narrow aisle, locking eyes with the older woman who had whispered. She gave him a small nod. He managed embarrassed, grim smile back. The ground crew ushered him to the door. He walked down the jet bridge, steps heavy. The dull industrial carpet scuffed under his polished shoes. The smell of jet fuel and stale air pressed in, nauseating. When he exited back into the terminal, he stopped, squared his shoulders, and pulled out his phone to call customer service. As he did, he heard laughter echo from behind the counter. "Jason." Michael turned sharply. Jason was at the terminal desk again, arms crossed, watching him with undisguised glee. Jason's coworker snickered at something he whispered. Michael took a steadying breath and approached. He spoke clearly, deliberately. "I want you to process my refund. Or I want the name and badge number of a manager who can." Jason didn't budge. He raised both brows slowly, theatrically, and leaned forward on his elbows. "Refund? For what exactly?" Michael's voice tightened. "For the first-class seat you stole from me, that I paid for, that you downgraded to a seat by the bathroom." He felt like he was vibrating with suppressed energy, with the need to do something, say something that would make them all see. He had been patient. He had been polite. He had been every bit the respectable, paying customer they pretended they wanted. And they had treated him like trash, like some pest to be expelled, humiliated, mocked for the amusement of their co-workers. Now finally, sitting there as the gate agents prepared for the next flight, Michael let himself feel the full weight of who he was. Not the powerless man they saw, but the senior acquisitions director for Lockwell Defense Systems, a multi-billion-dollar firm with government contracts spanning continents, and the power to make or break entire manufacturing lines with a single signature. He thought of the open contract on his desk back in D.C., the $2.9 billion order for long-range jet purchases and servicing agreements, all of which depended on a finalized partnership with this airline's parent company. He closed his eyes, letting the truth settle in him like stone. They didn't just insult a man. They insulted a partner. He opened his phone again, flicked to his contacts, found the one labeled Legal Team HQ, and hit dial. The ring buzzed in his ear, harsh and cold, and when the familiar voice answered, he didn't waste time. "Mark, it's Harris. Listen carefully." The voice on the other end went alert immediately. "Michael, where the hell are you? We've been trying to reach you about the final revisions." Michael's voice was low and calm, but it carried an edge that could have cut glass. "You're going to kill the contract." Silence. Then a choking sound of surprise. "I'm sorry, what?" Michael's eyes stayed fixed on the terminal counter where Jason and Carla were talking with another staff member, laughing as if nothing had happened. "You heard me. Kill it. Call procurement, call the COO, get them all on the line. Tell them we're pulling the proposal. Effective immediately." The lawyer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Michael, that's a $2.9 billion order. This has been in negotiation for months. You can't just..." Michael's voice didn't waver. "I can, and I will, because this company can't guarantee professionalism, courtesy, or basic human respect to a business partner's representative. I just got thrown out of their terminal, laughed at, insulted, physically blocked from boarding a flight I paid for, and threatened with a ban if I complained. I have it all documented. And if that's their treatment of an executive they want business from, then imagine how they treat anyone else. Tell them it's over." Mark let out a long exhale on the other end, the weight of what Michael was saying finally registering. "Jesus, Michael, are you sure? You want me to pull the trigger right now?" Michael watched Carla from across the terminal. She was checking IDs at the gate, back ramrod straight, in her blazer, the perfect image of customer service if you didn't know better. Jason lounged next to her, clearly telling some half-funny story to another co-worker who forced a polite laugh. Michael's voice lowered another notch, steely and sure. "Yes, right now." Mark inhaled. "Understood. I'll escalate it. They're not going to be happy." Michael's lips twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's the idea. Call me back when it's confirmed." He hung up without waiting for a goodbye, his thumb hovering over the screen for a moment before he set the phone carefully in his lap. He sat very still, the buzz of the terminal all around him. He could hear children squealing, intercom announcements calling final boarding, the rolling suitcases clattering over the tile. But to him it all sounded distant, muffled, like it was happening underwater. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled up his email and typed out another message. This time it wasn't to customer service or the app's faceless support team. It was to the airline's corporate contracts liaison, the same executive he'd been negotiating with for the past year, the one who had wined and dined him in Manhattan and talked about partnership and synergy. The planes belonged to them, this airline that had spent the entire morning treating him like trash, like an inconvenience, like an intruder in a world where he didn't belong. He breathed in slow and deep, letting the smell of jet fuel and recirculated air fill his lungs before exhaling. Behind him, the terminal remained busy but restless. Passengers continued to board and disembark. Announcements crackled over the PA system, but there was a shift in the atmosphere. Small at first, subtle. The kind of shift that only happens when staff start whispering urgent words into walkie-talkies, when supervisors' faces go pale and tight, when corporate phones start buzzing with the kind of calls that ruin days and careers. He turned, scanning the area. Jason was no longer lounging at the counter, nowhere in sight, likely having been yanked into a back office for what was surely the first conversation of many. But Carla was still there, her blazer slightly wrinkled from frantic movement, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. She wasn't smiling anymore. She wasn't projecting calm corporate efficiency. She looked like someone trying not to throw up. Michael's phone buzzed in his palm. He glanced down, reading the new message from Market Legal. "It's done. Confirmation sent. The entire deal is terminated." They're freaking out. Michael's jaw tightened. He replied only 2 words. "Thank you." He pocketed the phone and continued watching Carla. She seemed frozen, rereading the message that had just arrived in her inbox, the subject line screaming at her in all caps. Termination of contract negotiations, immediate effect. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the screen, no longer trying to hide her reaction. The staff around her fell silent, exchanging looks, noticing her distress. One young employee leaned in and whispered something. Carla didn't answer. Michael waited, letting her see him watching. And when her eyes finally met his, he held her gaze without blinking. He let every ounce of the cold, cutting truth he felt radiate back at her. She had tried to humiliate him. She had tried to erase him. Now she would have to explain this to her bosses, to her boss's bosses, all the way up the chain to the people whose bonuses depended on that $2.9 billion deal. He turned slowly and walked toward the escalators, not bothering to look back. He had just reached the bottom level when his phone buzzed again, this time with news alerts from financial apps and media outlets he subscribed to. He paused, heart pounding, and read the headlines as they refreshed in real time. Breaking. Major defense contractor cancels $2.9 billion fleet deal with Airline Co. parent. Airline Co. stock falls 6% after surprise termination of procurement contract. Sources cite breakdown in negotiations as airline faces major loss. He scrolled, jaw tightening. Another headline from a tech blog. Insider sources say contract pulled over incident involving senior executive at terminal. Michael let out a short, humorless breath, halfway between a laugh and a grunt of satisfaction. He thumbed over to his camera roll and replayed the footage he'd taken of Jason blocking him from boarding, that smug, laughing face framed by the sterile glow of the gate lighting. He watched the part where Jason physically planted himself in Michael's path and spat, "Good luck with that complaint," right into the lens. He felt his grip tighten so hard around the phone that it creaked. He uploaded the video to his social media accounts without hesitation, adding a simple caption, "When you spend $2.9 billion with a company and they treat you like this. Hashtag know your place, hashtag airline fail." He hit post. Within minutes, his phone began vibrating with a steady, relentless rhythm. Likes, shares, retweets, comments pouring in. People demanded to know what happened. Influencers picked it up and added their own biting commentary. Civil rights organizations tagged their followers, calling it proof of systemic bias and disrespect. But it didn't stop there. Stephen Alvarez, the off-duty journalist who'd been recording in the terminal, had messaged Michael hours earlier, asking for permission to use the clips and Michael's statement. Michael had given it. Now Stephen's article dropped on a major news site, complete with embedded video. Headline: Airline staff laugh about knowing your place after forcing black executive from flight. The glow of the dashboard lit his face, casting sharp shadows beneath his eyes. His phone buzzed constantly on the passenger seat, vibrating with calls and messages he had no intention of answering right now. Instead, he listened to the local news radio, the same corporate-friendly station he'd had on when he left the hotel that morning. Except now, the entire tone had shifted. In other news, Airline Co. stock took a sharp dive today following the sudden termination of a major procurement deal valued at nearly $3 billion. The move comes after a viral video surfaced showing airline staff mocking and humiliating a black executive, reportedly leading to the contract collapse. Analysts warn of serious reputational damage. He let it drone on. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't even smiling. He was too tired for that, too raw. He just felt the cold certainty that came from knowing he had done what he said he would do. He'd promised Jason they'd regret it. And they were starting to. By the time he reached his hotel downtown, the story was everywhere. The lobby TV was set to a business channel, where talking heads discussed the plummeting stock price in breathless tones, graphs illustrating its nosedive in lurid red. Another segment showed the footage of Jason blocking Michael from boarding, spitting his sarcastic "good luck with that complaint," while passengers filmed, a smirk frozen forever on his face. The cheer read, "Airline Co. under fire for racially charged incident." Michael watched without expression as the segment cut to their bland official statement. "We sincerely apologize to Mr. Harris for the unacceptable treatment he experienced. We are conducting a full investigation. We value all of our customers and do not tolerate discrimination of any kind." He almost laughed at the stiff, lawyer-approved wording, at how empty it sounded now that the damage was done. He checked his email on his phone and found 3 messages from Erlanico's corporate office with subject lines like "Urgent request to discuss," "Please respond," "Resolution," and "Apology and offer." He deleted them without opening a single one. He wasn't going to let them fix this with hush money. Meanwhile, the real consequences were only beginning. He heard from Danielle later that night, when she called him from her car in the parking lot outside the terminal. She was practically vibrating with energy. "They fired him," she said breathlessly. "Jason, gone." They escorted him out of the building. "I watched them do it." Michael closed his eyes, exhaling. "Good." He tried to argue. He said it was just a joke, that everyone was too sensitive. HR didn't even let him finish. They had security walk him right to the door. He's banned from working in any airport in the network. He's blacklisted. Michael sat back in the hotel chair, running a hand over his face. He didn't feel joy exactly, but there was a grim satisfaction. "And Carla?" he asked. Danielle let out a bitter laugh. "Suspended. They wouldn't say for how long, but I heard a supervisor talking. She's under review. But the way everyone's talking, she's done. Her email is all over the news. That threat she sent you? They're calling it evidence of retaliatory intimidation." Michael's mouth twisted. "Good. She wrote it herself. She knows it's over," Danielle added. She looked sick. She was trying to talk to corporate on the phone all day. "I'm telling you, she's going to resign before they even have to fire her. It's damage control now." He nodded slowly. "That's what they deserve." And it wasn't just Jason and Carla. As the story grew, reporters started digging deeper. News outlets picked up not only Michael's viral video, but Stephen Alvarez's longer investigative piece. He'd compiled passenger interviews, including Danielle's, along with footage from multiple angles. Clips of Jason joking about plantations and telling Michael to know his place played on national TV. Carla's stiff, dismissive words about Michael being aggressive and the threat to ban him for filing complaints were read aloud by serious anchors with grave expressions. The public reaction was immediate and merciless. Social media erupted with outrage, hashtags trending globally. Civil rights leaders condemned the incident in press conferences. Celebrity influencers posted about boycotting the airline, tagging their millions of followers. The company's brand partnerships came under scrutiny, with sponsors quietly backing away to avoid the toxic fallout. Michael didn't celebrate. He just watched it happen. He received a call from the airline's senior vice president of customer operations 2 days later. He didn't answer. They tried emailing him again. This time, they offered a full refund, a lifetime status membership, and a substantial goodwill payment for your inconvenience. He deleted the emails. They didn't understand. This wasn't about buying him off. He watched the company issue a second, more desperate apology on national TV. Their CEO stood stiffly at a podium in a sterile conference room, reading from prepared remarks. Michael returned to DC months later. The memory of that humiliating day at the airport no longer a burning wound, but a dull, meaningful scar that reminded him of what he had refused to tolerate. He had moved on to negotiating new contracts with rival airlines eager to prove their inclusive values in the wake of the scandal. His own company had congratulated him for protecting their integrity, for refusing to sign a billion-dollar check to partners who couldn't even guarantee basic respect. Yet despite the boardroom victories and the public vindication, Michael never let himself forget that moment when he was told to know his place. He used it. He carried it with him. He shared the lesson privately with his team, mentoring younger employees who feared speaking up when they faced subtle or overt bias. He even helped draft a corporate policy on selecting travel vendors with strict anti-discrimination clauses. He could have chosen to shut it away entirely, but he wouldn't let it rot unexamined. One gray autumn afternoon, Michael sat at his corner office desk reviewing next year's procurement plan when his assistant buzzed him. "There's a man in the lobby asking to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Michael frowned. Did he give a name? There was a pause. He said, "Jason Parker. He says you'll know who he is." Michael's fingers froze on the keyboard. He exhaled once, the sound hissing between his teeth. Jason Parker. He hadn't spoken that name out loud in months. Not since the contract termination, not since the humiliating firings and the press conferences and the forced apologies. He looked out at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the glass slightly fogged from the cold. He pressed the button. Send him up. He stood when the door opened, feeling an odd, sharp tension settle in his chest. Jason entered slowly, hat in his hands, hair shorter than Michael remembered, clothes rumpled and a little too big for his thinner frame. He looked like a man who hadn't been sleeping well. He paused a few feet inside, his eyes darting around the sleek, polished office before settling on Michael. Michael didn't move. He just watched him, arms loose at his sides. Jason swallowed audibly. "Mr. Harris, thank you for seeing me. I know you don't have to." Michael gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." Jason eased into it like it might collapse beneath him. He didn't meet Michael's eyes at first. Instead, he wrung his hat in his lap, breathing in short, shallow bursts. Finally, he spoke. "I lost everything." He let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Not that you care. I mean, you shouldn't care. I wouldn't care. But I wanted you to know." Michael watched him without blinking. "Go on." Jason's fingers trembled around the hat brim. "They fired me, blacklisted me from every airport in the state. My name got shared to other networks. Couldn't even get a desk job at a bus company once they Googled me. My girlfriend left, said she wouldn't be with someone famous for being a racist. I moved back in with my parents. They're the only ones who take me." He paused, voice breaking. "They're ashamed of me too." Michael let the silence stretch. He didn't interrupt. Jason sniffed, wiping at his eyes. "I didn't come here to beg. I don't even know what I want. I wanted to say I'm sorry, really sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I see it now. I see what I sounded like, what I did, what I was part of." He finally lifted his eyes. They were red and wet. "You didn't deserve that. No one does. I thought I was being funny or tough or whatever. I was just being cruel and blind." Michael's jaw tightened once, but his voice was even. "You thought it was normal." Jason nodded desperately. "Yeah, normal. Everyone did it. Even Carla. Even the other guys. We all laughed. We called it just jokes. I didn't think. Or maybe I did think and didn't care. Which is worse?" He wiped at his face again. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to believe me. But I'm sorry." Michael studied him carefully. This wasn't the sneering clerk who had told him to know his place. This was a broken man grappling with the weight of his own failure. Michael felt an old anger flicker alive in his chest, but it didn't blaze. It just glowed, like a coal reminding him not to forget. He took a breath. "I don't forgive easily." Jason nodded miserably. "I know," Michael continued, "but I'm not here to watch you grovel. You're here because you want something. You want absolution." Jason swallowed. "No. I mean yes. But not from you. From myself. I can't sleep. I can't stop seeing your face when they dragged you out. When I laughed. I'm haunted by it." Michael leaned back slightly, arms folding. He let the silence stretch again. "What are you doing about it?" Jason blinked. "What?" Michael's voice was like steel wrapped in velvet. "What are you doing about it? Being sorry isn't enough. Crying isn't enough. Losing your job isn't enough. What have you done?" Jason's lips quivered. "I tried. I went to a community center. They didn't want me at first, but I volunteered to clean, then to help with paperwork. I signed up for bias training they do there. I'm learning. I'm trying to learn. I don't want to be that guy again." He sniffed hard. "I don't want anyone to think I'm that guy again." Michael regarded him coolly, but something in his eyes softened by a fraction. "Good. Keep doing it." Jason let out a long, shuddering breath. "I will. I promise. Even if it doesn't fix anything. Even if no one believes me." Michael nodded once. "It doesn't fix it, but it's a start." Jason's head fell. I'll leave you alone now." Michael spoke before he could stand. "Jason." Jason froze. Michael's voice was quiet, firm. "You can't undo it. You can't buy it back. But you can change. And if you really want to make this right, don't just volunteer. Don't just learn. When you hear someone make those jokes, shut them down. When you see someone treated like I was, stand up. When you have power again, use it better than you did." Jason's lip trembled. Tears rolled unchecked. He nodded fiercely. "I will. I swear." Michael finally stood, extending a hand. Jason stared at it for a moment before gripping it like a lifeline. Michael's grip was firm, not forgiving everything, but acknowledging the promise of something better. They held it for a long moment before Michael pulled away. "Go do the work." Jason nodded again, wiping his eyes, voice cracking. "Thank you." He left quietly, shoulders hunched but purposeful. Michael sat back down at his desk, staring out the window at the autumn rain. He closed his eyes, exhaled slowly. The anger was still there, but it felt different now. Not gone, but transformed. A tool, a lesson, a vow. He knew the fight wasn't over. He knew there were 100 Jasons still out there who hadn't been caught on camera, who hadn't been forced to see themselves in the harsh light of public shame. But if even one could change, if even one could see, then maybe it was worth it. The end. If you made it this far, thanks for reading this story. I hope you found it powerful, challenging, and maybe even a little uncomfortable in all the right ways. It's meant to be. This is the kind of story that asks us to look hard at ourselves, at our systems, and at the choices we make when no one's watching. If you appreciated it, consider showing your support. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I have plenty more stories that dig deep into justice, power, and the consequences of our actions. I'd also love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of the plot? Did any part of it surprise you, make you angry, make you think? And where are you watching or reading from? Drop a comment and let me know. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Let's talk about it in the comments.